With the recent announcement of Pokemon's latest games known as Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, a gigantic buzz was created in the community. Unfortunately, that buzz is something that can be considered as the most polarizing to this date. Some people are actually looking forward to it and cannot wait to revisit Kanto again in such a unique and a colorful manner. Others, which are usually longtime Pokemon players however, seem to be rejecting the new step Game Freak is taking and are overall not a fan of it. As a result, a lot of controversy has resulted from it, with both sides being at each other's throats. So I figured I may as well join in on the fray and give my insight on what I think of the current situation and my overall view of the Let's Go games. So with that being in mind, enough of me rambling on, let's get this show on the road, shall we? As far as my initial reactions go when I saw the first trailer, I wasn't necessarily in awe with the human character models, and to this day still think that they pretty much took a step back to how the models were during Generation 6, which is perfectly fine. Regarding other matters though, I really liked the graphics related to the areas and came to appreciate just how beautifully colored Kanto is. So in that regard, that's one of the main things I'm looking forward to experience the most. The main attraction for me, however, would have to be the fact that following Pokemon finally do return this time around, except it's 1,000 times better than before. Just the fact that I can ride around Kanto with Charizard or Arcanine and even Onix is insane. I'd say that this is the main thing that's in my eyes stopping this entry from being quite literally a simplified to the core Pokemon game. It gives me new ways of exploring which were impossible in the past games due to the hardware it was operating in, which is something that I genuinely believe to be a huge step forward for the franchise. It's overall a great strategy that's bound to attract players and take the initiative to buy the game, that's for sure. Furthermore, from everything that I've seen so far, this is arguably the perfect way for reintroducing returning players to the franchise. It's no secret that Game Freak has been actively struggling with their recent products because they constantly had to consider adjusting their game in order to make sure that these new Pokemon and the other dynamics do not end up overwhelming the new and returning players, which in my eyes led to the overall product being negatively affected. This now means that they have absolutely nothing that's stopping them from making the main series Pokemon game the way they see fit, which is something I genuinely believe that both the developers and the longtime Pokemon players can really appreciate, so in a sense, both sides do win at the end of the day. It's also a good idea for bridging the gap between Pokemon players and Pokemon Go players, which in theory should generate a lot of sales for the Switch and the game itself. Finally, I absolutely adored the idea of being able to play the game with my close friends next to me, or any family members really. If there's something that more or less guarantees an enriched experience, it'd have to be playing the game with someone close to you. So in that regard, this is definitely something I'm sure will entertain both me and many others that choose to play the game, that's for sure. However, as a longtime player of the franchise, I'd be lying if I said I didn't see any fault in the games or the direction they're trying to take. If I were to think from a grand scheme of things, there are some traits which I find to be quite faulty with the game itself so far. First things first, let's start with addressing the elephant in the room, being the capture system. From the recent interview with Junichi Masuda, it was revealed that the decision was not made specifically to give the Pokemon feel, but also because apparently the mechanics of catching them that existed for all 7 generations appear to be a bit too difficult for some players. While I obviously can't give a proper answer to such a remark, seeing as to how I'm not entirely too knowledgeable on the matter, obviously the longtime player in me does not like the idea of such a drastic change so suddenly. But it's also a common human trait to be against such change, especially when it involves something that we've been used to for so long. I think it's best to wait and experience it ourselves before coming up with a verdict, but that's just me. That being said, what I don't necessarily like at all is the fact that through such a change being implemented, I am now forced to continuously catch the same Pokemon over and over again in order to gain experience, should the necessity for grinding arise after I'm done taking out most of the trainers in the routes. Being met with the sight of seeing the same Pokemon in my PC is something that I can't necessarily appreciate, so I hope they paid enough attention in terms of gameplay to avoid such a scenario. On the bright side though, I'm relieved to see that I'll still get to actually fight the legendaries instead of throwing balls at them, so it isn't entirely a lost cause. Another thing that I can't necessarily appreciate about the game though would have to be the very evident hand-holding. Now, while I do completely understand the idea of the game being a way to introduce new players to the franchise, as well as a form of welcoming back returning players from Pokemon Go, I think Game Freak is honestly underestimating the capability of their target audience. Being a guy that grew up with games, I think I can speak for a great number of people when I say that games having no form of handholding, but instead being challenging, didn't dissuade me from playing the games, but instead made me want to beat it even more, thereby making me more immersed in it. And it's not like Pokemon is anywhere near as impossibly difficult to beat as the original Legend of Zelda game, where you quite literally need a guide to know what to do next. In that sense, I don't really think them introducing such requirements when entering gyms and so on are necessary. At all. In fact, it could even work against Game Freak's intentions and act as something so easy to figure out which would lead to the player being bored. To end this topic, it's no secret that the first two generations of Pokemon games offered arguably the most difficult challenge, mainly due to how unbalanced the mechanics were during then. Despite all of that, it still didn't stop these games from being the huge hits and stop Pokemon from being the giant that it is today. And considering the fact that the mechanics are now much more balanced than normal too, it really makes me scratch my head and make me wonder what their point is really. Finally, I can't say I'm too fond of the idea of the fact that you cannot evolve your starter Pokemon in the game, particularly Eevee. Pikachu I can understand since it's undoubtedly more popular than its evolution, but the fact that you're taking away Eevee's main attraction, which is the ability to evolve into a variety number of Pokemon, is something I honestly don't get. It also all but confirms that there is no special evolution for the next games, which is something I really expected through the announcement of the game. Oh well. At the end of the day though, this is still a very ambitious step taken by Game Freak, and it remains to be seen just how well it will do. As far as where I stand though, I definitely am going to play this game with an optimistic mindset and see what it has to offer. I am sure that if I treat this as a Pokemon game that follows through the last 7 generations, I am not going to enjoy it and will find it underwhelming. Instead, I'll play this the way this game is prompting me to play, and that is with my close friends and family relatives as we explore through the now beautiful Kanto region together. I can understand why they're all doing this because Masuda himself openly mentioned that he is afraid of the current formula for Pokemon games becoming stale and hopes to continue evolving it so that the interest always remains the same, which is something I can genuinely appreciate. He also mentioned that it means a lot to him if both the longtime players and the new ones come together with the new entries, but as of now, I don't think he'd be able to accomplish such a wish. The reason I say that is because these games aren't compromising in any form for the old players, and by the looks of it, Game Freak won't do the same for the 2019 main series release because they know that if they do such a thing, it'll piss off a lot of fans. So as of now, there still may be a division between both the casual and a long-time fanbase, but for future titles, more initiatives may be taken in the form of more options, a difficulty mode, and so on. So who knows? Either way, I do have my doubts with this one, and for Game Freak's sake, I hope that this does end up being successful. I understand the pessimism surrounding the games, but I personally don't think it's okay to outright bash the product and speak ill of the developers producing the game. Nor do I think it's okay to call people entitled just because they're simply criticizing the game in a harmless manner. We'll only find out everything when the game comes out or until we find more news. So until then, it best be that we wait and see. With that being said, that's gonna be all there is to it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this new direction I'm taking with my channel, and I'm genuinely curious to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. So if possible, do let me know your thoughts with the game itself, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, my name is TheUzigunner, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Peace!